Hey, ladies, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing
Good.
well. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
absolutely. It's really good to meet you guys. And so, for those of my audience who have not heard of you, you are Melissa and Sunny, and you host a podcast called The Whole Pack Podcast. And you both have some interesting careers, right? That are, not typically what I tend to talk about on my show. So, when I discovered you guys, I thought, oh, I love to have different perspectives, have people that have different roles in animal care, welfare, rescue, that sort of thing. So I was really excited to bring you guys on together and get your unique perspective. But before we dive into that, I would be interested to know what led you each to your specific role within animal care, animal health, and then what kind of brought you together and inspired you to start the podcast?
So I actually came into this work through a combination of food, animals, and grief. I was a
Oh,
professional chef for many years, and so food and nutrition had always been a huge part of my life. But the real catalyst for moving into canine nutrition and holistic health was my Cane Corso Nacho, which I named my company after. He developed hemangiosarcoma when he was only 6 years old. And that experience just completely changed the trajectory of my life. I became immersed in nutrition, mushrooms, herbs, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, stress reduction, you name it, all the different ways we could support his body alongside veterinary care. And I also became very aware of what happens emotionally to the person caring for an animal with cancer. So, you suddenly become a caregiver, a part researcher, a part nurse, part advocate, right? So you're watching every meal, every breath, every change in energy. And I just became hyper aware, because we love them so much and that the time may be limited. So after Nacho died, my world just changed. Went from food and wine straight into holistic pet health. I knew I wanted to help other people navigate that world with more support and less fear, because that's what I find, you're very fearful when you're in this situation. So that's a big reason cancer prevention and cancer support became such an important part of my work. And I think that the whole pack grew out of a similar realization. Like Melissa and I, we spend so much time talking about how we can better help animals, but also their people and pet health practitioners. So we started thinking like, who is taking care of the people doing this work? So there's so many conversations we have around modalities, nutrition and herbs and all those things. But I think there are fewer, more honest conversations about the human being behind the practitioner. And also there's a lot of polar opposites in this world. So we wanted to kind of bring a different perspective and maybe play devil's advocate sometimes, but just have people really kind of think critically about everything that was suggested. So what happens when you're carrying, say, 10 difficult cases at once? What happens when, a client's loss reminds you of your own, or when you care deeply, but you're also trying to run a business and have relationships and sleep at night, right? So that I think became part of the mission behind the whole pack. I'm sure Melissa can add some really good stuff to that, but we wanted to talk about the whole practitioner, not just what they know, but also what this work asks of them emotionally.
I love that because as a therapist myself, human therapist, I work in a very holistic approach, right? So I don't see people just as depression or just as PTSD. It's like I want to see the whole person, what they're eating, how they're sleeping, what kind of movement they're getting, and really
Mm.
just approach therapy from a very, very kind of holistic approach. And it's so interesting what you said about your life kind of changing as a result of grief.
Mm.
And I find that so many of my guests, and myself included, their life, their career takes a totally different path because of some type of trauma that they've
Mm.
endured. And so it sounds like your story is very similar to that. And so, Melissa, what kind of brought you into your line of work?
Similar. It was my own animals. I was researching how to help. I had a dog that had digestive issues from the time he was 10 weeks old on. And then I had a cat that also, she had thyroid issues and conventional medicine wasn't helping. So I really started researching. And then alongside that, I had a corporate job, which was taking a toll on me, my nervous system. So I kind of went back to energy healing. And it was something that I had studied years before, but like this whole conglomeration of all these things, just different doors started opening and then boop, career change. Now I'm an animal communicator. So it went from, just trying to help my animals to wanting to be able to support other people that needed that service too, because I know how lonely it felt. I couldn't get answers. I was watching my animals just decline and die, and I couldn't do that. So, I mean, my animals are my world. They are my children. So that wasn't going to happen. And from that, I became an animal communicator. And then the whole pack, Sunny and I had taken a program together. We just were talking as entrepreneurs, as friends. And we were talking about, the stuff that Sunny mentioned, but also the emotional component where it's like, oh my gosh, compassion fatigue. There's imposter syndrome is huge. It just is so isolating to be an entrepreneur on your own. So, we wanted to reach out to those other professionals that might also feel alone in these emotional and just navigating the whole system. And we just wanted to be a voice where everybody could come together. And it doesn't matter if you're on one side or the other. We're trying to bring things to the middle instead of things being separate. Because at the end of the day, we got started because of our animal. And a lot of people have that same story. Our goal is to help as many animals as possible. So it doesn't matter if they're coming from a different belief system or mindset. We have that in common. So let's have conversations about it.
Yeah, I really like that you brought that up because as we were talking in the beginning, my audience is comprised of everything from shelter workers and volunteers to ACOs to vet techs to, you name it. And I've done that on purpose. One of the reasons is because I have kind of a unique background myself. I've worn the boots and the sandals, right? So I've been an ACO, I've been involved in shelter work, I've been a youth tech, but I'm also involved in animal rights and veganism. And so I wanted to bring everybody together because there is so much division and infighting and drama within these fields. And it's guys, I mean, we have some differences, but I think emotionally we're struggling with a lot of the same things. And like I said, I really like to get different perspectives. And so compassion fatigue can show up in very similar ways, but I think also very unique ways. And so let's go back to you, Sunny. Do you think that compassion fatigue shows up differently in some aspects in your line of work? And then I'd love to hear Melissa, because you guys have two different lines of work. I'd love to hear if you feel that compassion fatigue has any ways of kind of uniquely manifesting within your field as well.
Yeah, I don't think that for me, when I hear compassion fatigue, it shows up differently, right? But it's a series of small realizations for me that made me realize, because I'm working with cancer, right? So, you're entering people's lives at one of the most vulnerable moments. And sometimes somebody's contacting me days after they're hearing a diagnosis and they're terrified and they're Googling everything and they're afraid they're feeding the wrong thing or choosing the wrong supplements or because I've been that person, I can feel that fear very deeply. And so I find that that's a strength and a vulnerability in our work, but I've noticed it in pet sitting too, right? So sometimes I'll visit an animal. I've shared this with Melissa, and everything is technically fine and they've been fed and they're safe and they have water, but then maybe the house is really silent, the curtains are closed, or, there aren't many toys around or opportunities for engagement. So the animal is just waiting. So I found myself feeling sad when I leave. So it's not just if an animal's dying. So it shows up kind of all over the place. And I have to be careful because I'm only, of course, seeing a tiny snapshot of that animal's life. And it's not my job to make assumptions about the family, but I am also an empath like we all are. And you mentioned veganism. I'm also vegan for the animal. So, it just kind of shows up triple. So I think that, when I began to understand that emotional exhaustion in animal work doesn't only come from emergencies and death. They show up from witnessing those little moments of, it can be loneliness or fear or boredom or aging, right? I mean, I just went to visit a 15-year-old Chihuahua who can barely walk. And it's it makes me think oh no, poor you. But then I was no, this animal is beautiful. And Melissa and I, we went through the same animal Reiki practitioner program, and we choose to look at the animal as perfect. And that helps a little bit, but you can't help but sort of almost project your sadness sometimes onto animals,
Yeah.
and that makes you exhausted. So that could also be compassion fatigue, right? None of those moments really individually break you, but it's just like I find the accumulation. So if I don't catch myself and I go for weeks on end, then I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can do this. But then you have to like do something, right? Because obviously we're here for the animals. So that's, I think, how it shows up differently, how I've experienced it.
And I like the fact that you are speaking from two angles, right? So the nutritionist as well as the pet sitter angle,
Mm.
because there's so many kind of different experiences, and people, I think, have the misunderstanding of like, okay, as a nutritionist, like why would you have compassion fatigue? Or as a pet sitter, oh, you get to play with kind of like
Yeah.
shelter work. You play with puppies and kitties all day. It's like, you know, and it's like nothing could be further from the truth. There's so much that's behind the scenes that people really don't
Hmm.
understand. And so, Melissa, let's talk about your line of work and how you think compassion fatigue might show up maybe a little bit differently.
So for me, I'm working with animals who maybe they experienced a trauma and I'm inviting them. So when I'm doing an animal communication, I'm inviting them to kind of come into my body. So I will feel an experience and sometimes they will share a feeling of that experience. So feeling that trauma, seeing that trauma is a lot. I work with end of life. I work with recently crossed and doing a mediumship reading with an animal in spirit. So there's a lot of human emotion that comes with that, with my own experience of grief and losing an animal. So there's the empathy that comes with knowing what that feels like to walk that path and to hold space for people. It can be a lot. If I'm working 5 days a week, if I look at my emails, there's emergencies, there's lost pets, there's animals that are near death. And if there's an urgency to it that puts even more pressure on me, like I can never be off. I feel like if I miss an email, I mean, I have better boundaries now, but that's how it was showing up for me is checking my email 20 times a day, 7 days a week and jumping. If somebody had an emergency, putting my full life aside to help them. And that started to burn me out.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so you mentioned that you have better boundaries now. So I'd love to hear from each of you because so the first episode of your podcast that I listened to was actually about compassion fatigue, and it was just a great episode. And I highly recommend my listeners go and check out not only that episode but really the whole podcast. And so, how do you each go about managing this and staying engaged and staying passionate in the work at the same time?
Yeah, I can start. So, one of the biggest things that I've learned is that recovery can only happen when you're already depleted, right? I try to build this, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, like small forms of decompression into the work itself. So sometimes that means physically getting outside between, cases and consultations, right? Walking, cooking, because I'm a chef, I love just to get in the kitchen. That's my sort of Zen place.
Mm.
And then being in nature, or doing something sensory that brings me back into my own body instead of just staying inside my head. I think that's a big one. And I've also become much more conscious, kind of what Melissa was alluding to about boundaries around communication, right? Because when you're dealing with cases like me, an animal that's sick with cancer, every message feels urgent, right? So, but if you're available emotionally 24 hours a day, eventually you're not going to truly be available to anyone. So I remind myself that I can be deeply committed without being constantly accessible. And that's a hard one,
It
you know.
is, yeah.
And another thing that helped me is asking a very simple question after difficult conversations. And I think Melissa and I've been talking about it, like, what belongs to me here?
Mm.
Like my job may be to educate, to listen, to formulate a nutrition plan, or offer supportive options, or help someone think through a decision. But the grief isn't mine to fix. And so the outcome isn't completely in my control at all. And death isn't, because that I deal with that too. I have clients pass away, and it's not evidence that I failed, because I felt that initially. I was like, oh my gosh, I wasn't able to help save that animal, because sometimes I'm the last option. Like they come to me that
Mm.
after they've tried everything else, and then you're supposed to be some miracle medicine woman, right? So all this may sound obvious when you say it out loud, but when you love animals and you're working with sick ones, you have to relearn that constantly. And every case is different. So I think it's incredibly important to have people in this field that you can talk to honestly, which is why I'm so grateful for Melissa, because we talk all the time and I can just call her up and say, oh, this case really got to me. And she totally understands, right? So sometimes what we need isn't another solution. It's just another human being to understand why something hurt. And then finally, I intentionally reconnect with the parts of animals that have nothing to do with illness, right? So play and humor and cooking something wonderful for my own dogs. That brings me joy, going for a walk and watching them do something ridiculous. Because if every interaction with animals becomes about fixing disease or preventing disease or anticipating loss, the work starts really stealing the very thing that brought you into it.
Yeah, that is a really, really good point. And you brought up a lot of really different techniques. And the thing is, both of you said that these boundaries and these coping skills, they weren't always there, right? This is not something that we're just kind of born with. And if you don't have these, then there's something wrong with you. This stuff can take years and can take ongoing reminders, right? Or even, like you said, just reaching out to Melissa or vice versa. It's like sometimes we get so in our head that we can't rationally sit down and, okay, let's use this coping skill. And we're going to do this. We're going to do. Sometimes we just need to externalize that. We bear witness to so much suffering. Sometimes humans need others to bear witness to our pain as well. And that can be very therapeutic.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, yeah. So first, before I go on, Melissa, when I was listening to the episode, I'm sorry, I forgot who had the morning routine that helped them. Oh, okay, Melissa, I'd love to hear about the morning routine and other ways that you manage compassion fatigue.
Yeah, sure. To what you were just saying, I just want to add I love what I do. So that made it harder for me to set boundaries because, working every day, it did not feel like my corporate job working every day, right? That's clear. I didn't like it. It wasn't a good fit. It's fine to turn everything off when I wasn't there. But working with animals is the most amazing thing. It's really a gift. So being able to set boundaries and know your limits, but a morning routine. So I didn't always have one, but setting aside that, an hour before my dogs get up, before my cats get up, it's dark. I love it. It's not for everybody, but really starting with a meditation, doing energy work, doing Qigong in the morning, and really setting my intentions for the day. I often invite in, if I know I have clients that day, I'll print their pictures and put them in my morning meditation. So it's very intentional, but that ritual in the morning sets the stage for the rest of the day. If I miss that, it's not going to be the greatest day for me because that really steadies me throughout the day. And then for me, like Sunny, a walking meditation. So again, this is something where I can go blow off steam, but really being intentional about it. If I can feel that maybe that last client, I'm really holding a lot of the emotions from it that aren't mine, or maybe they're kind of reminding me of something that I've gone through in the past. So it's bringing up some old emotions, that walking meditation where I'm walking in nature, whether I'm picking 5 things that are blue and finding them. It's going to slow down my breathing, just, relax my nervous system. You can do something with your senses too. That's another one where it's a walking meditation and I smell pine trees. I see a red bird, really activating things and getting out of your head and going more into your body. EFT, so emotional freedom technique, also called tapping. That's what I use when there's something a little bit heavier. Even if there's a day, I know there's going to be something, I lost my dog earlier this year and it was I'm still in grief and I'm, taking clients and of course that's all the clients I'm taking are end of life or it's just, we're attracting, right? Like attracts like. So it was just I have to do EFT so I can show up 100% for these people. And it's not like I was purging my own feelings, but I have to be neutral to be able to connect with these animals. Otherwise, I'm bringing my own stuff into it. And I don't need to dump that on them. I could go on, but those are my 2 favorite practices is the walking meditation and EFT. And of course, the morning routine.
I love that. I've been trying to get into a morning routine. I have been quite unsuccessful. How long did it kind of take you to really get to the point where it became a routine?
I tried for a long time. And I think the problem was, is I was trying what works for other people.
Mm.
So finding the thing that really, like writing, I could not write first thing in the morning. There's no way. So like that was garbage for me. But that might be something that people who like to write their feelings down, that might start energizing them every morning. So it's about pick a few things that you really like doing and then just stick to them for a week. And if it feels really forced, try something else. I mean, there's so many things that you can do, and meditation, sitting in silence, is absolutely not for everybody. I mean, that took me years of practice to get to a point where I could sit with myself. So if that's not for you, don't do it. Start with something else. Otherwise, you're dreading waking up, and then you're starting your day in dread, where I start my day looking forward to it. I used to work out first thing in the morning, but like Qigong is so much, it's just more about, kind of warming my body up and getting energy flowing through my body rather than like hitting the gym and being exhausted. And, that didn't work for me. It did years ago, but now it's like I'm a little more fatigued these days. So starting with something that energizes me is what really helps me.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you said that, right? Because the things that used to work for me 20, 30 years ago may not necessarily work anymore. So when it comes to self-care and coping skills and things like this, I think we really have to be kind of gentle with ourselves and allow ourselves to just be flexible. Just
Exactly.
because hitting the gym at 5 a.m. doesn't work for you anymore, that's okay. You just find what works. And a lot of it's kind of trial and error. See what works for you right now. Next week might be different, but what kind of works for you right now. And so you both alluded to some of the rewarding and joyful aspects of the job. And so I love to ask my guests about compassion satisfaction, which is the joy and the fulfillment that we get from the work. And research has shown is also a major buffer, a major protective factor against compassion fatigue. So, Sunny, let's start with you. What brings you compassion satisfaction?
It's just small things that clients I actually had two of them email me this morning, both with cancer, and saying like, oh, they're brighter, their tongue's more pink, and they're getting life back into them just because they changed the nutrition. And they're just amazed at that little thing, which isn't so little, but they think that actually changes so much. But I was looking at that, I was thinking about that question. And one of the things that has affected me recently is watching my own dog, Tofu. She's a Cane Corso Italian Mastiff, turn 10. And so for a giant breed dog, that feels like 10 just feels enormous to me emotionally, because I've never had dogs that reach that age before, believe it or not, because I always have giant breeds and they don't unfortunately live very long. But I'm also careful not to turn that into some simplistic message of like, oh, do everything I do and your dog will live to 10, because biology doesn't live that way. But just seeing her healthy and happy and interested in food and surrounded by people who love her. And it just reminded me why I became so passionate about prevention and quality of life in the first place. So compassion satisfaction to me isn't really some dramatic moment, right? Where I saved an animal, but it can be those small little things where pet parents are super happy, like, oh my gosh, what you told me worked. And it's that is just, and those subtle things are awesome. It's when someone tells me like after a consultation, like I finally understand how the body works or what I'm looking at, or when an older dog becomes interested in food again and can walk a little better, right? That's probably what keeps me here. So that's for me is just worth the world.
Yeah, I love that. It really is about celebrating those little victories. I mean, the
Mm.
big stuff it's obvious, right? But I think we tend to lose touch or not necessarily dismiss, but just maybe don't notice the small, subtle things like you mentioned, right?
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. How about for you, Melissa? What kind of keeps you engaged in getting up day after day and doing this work?
Oh, it is the little things for me too. Last week I had great feedback. So I love giving animals a voice. I mean, that is the biggest thing of what I do. And it was a dynamic between litter mates, a sister and a brother, little Italian greyhounds. And the brother was attacking the sister anytime she came nearby. So I connected, and what the brother told me is she's not respecting my boundaries. So it was different. It was what the guardian wasn't seeing. She was seeing when there was already like a little, fighting going on, and she was blaming the boy. But when I told her this, she's like, oh my gosh, that reminds me of my childhood. So, I mean, she sent me this long, beautiful email about how I opened her eyes. She sees her dog differently. Like, that's it. That's all I'm trying to do is just make a little room that someone can just see the situation different, because we get stuck in a story. I mean, when we're close to a situation, we get stuck in that story. So, like, just that little sliver of hope that, oh my gosh, I can see him differently. And that will help the dynamic in the long run. So, it's just little things like that. And the thank you for listening to me. I haven't been listened to in years, just those little nods of like, okay, this is why I do this, because I want to help the people. I want to help the animals.
Oh, I love that. And so before we wrap up here, where can people go to find out and learn more about what you both do, as well as where to listen to your podcast? Let's start with you, Sunny.
Yeah, sure. You can find me on my website. It's nachoaveragedoghealthcoach.com. It's a mouthful. And you can also email me at sunny@nachoaveragedoghealthcoach.com. And also Instagram and Facebook is at nachoaveragedoghealthcoach. And you can feel free to DM me there. And Melissa, you want to share where they can find you, and then you can share where we host our podcast.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you can find me at calmingcreek.com, and you can email me, Melissa at Calming Creek. And I'm on all the social at Calming Creek. And you can listen to our podcast anywhere that podcasts are, wherever you listen to your podcast. But we are on Substack. We write a little bit more on Substack too. So if you go over there, the show notes are a little bit longer, but it's The Whole Pack. And on socials, we're at The Whole Pack.
All right, wonderful. And I will put all of those links in the show notes. So, listeners, if you're out and about or driving and can't write that down, check out the show notes and there'll be all those links in there. All right, ladies, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Take care of yourselves and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care.